Welcome to the Point of Focus podcast. Jer's back to talk everything into reality.
We'll be back every week all season long
with your host, Jeremy Piccott.
Focusing only on things that we want to get bigger in our lives.
Made by coaches and collaborators coming together for the purpose of co-creating.
Enjoy or join the in-depth discussion, information, and how-tos.
Stay tuned for another episode of the Point of Focus podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Point of Focus podcast. In today's episode, we have Staci Backauskas. She's here to talk about how overcoming the habits and beliefs created by childhood trauma can smooth out the spiritual path for you so you can get out of your own way and experience less suffering, drama, and feelings of frustration so you can live a more meaningful life. Please welcome Staci Backauskas.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you, Staci. Please tell me a little bit about your story and how you came to this.
Well, I've been on a spiritual journey since 1987 or 88, when I walked into my first Unity bookstore and bought a copy of As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And that really, I was raised as a Catholic, but I was in middle school taking Baptist Bible study classes because I wasn't getting what I needed from that. And so it really has kind of set me on a Joseph Campbell hero's journey kind of situation where I have studied so much. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I have been a witch. I have studied paganism. I connect with traditional, with Native American traditions or indigenous traditions. And so what I kept finding, the more I did, was I still felt stuck. And when I found, I did the Course in Miracles and all these other things, I felt like I had been trying so hard to understand what it meant to be spiritual and what it meant to live the kind of life I really wanted to live. And when I found Abraham Hicks, I thought, this must be the answer. And this is long before The Secret came out or anything else. And I love Abraham. And Bashar and a lot of the other teachers who are channeling entities from the other side, whatever that means. And what I discovered in doing it was I could stay focused and committed for a certain period of time, and then it would all fall apart. And then I was back to where I was, or even what felt like further back than where I was when I started. And it was so frustrating to me, and I would read books by different spiritual teachers and gurus. And I'll be honest, the only one that I have ever found, and can I curse on this show?
You sure can.
Okay, because I could curse like a sailor, if we're honest. But the only one that I ever found for me that worked was Caroline Myss, because she can bitch slap your soul like nobody else I have ever encountered. She doesn't put any sugarcoating on anything. It is the way it is. And I resonated with her, but I kept looking. And I know that's partly the role of a seeker, to keep looking, but I just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And in all honesty, it's only been probably 5 or 6 years ago that I began to realize how much the trauma I experienced early in life had created patterns and habits and beliefs that were so deeply embedded in my nervous system, as well as my subconscious, and began to raise my awareness about that I started to understand, well, no wonder I couldn't do Abraham Hicks the way everybody on the cruise is. They're all having a great time and manifesting and visualizing, and I'm in my bedroom with the covers over my head, sucking my thumb. What is wrong here, But I transferred it to what's wrong with me to what's wrong. What needs to be different? What needs to change?
Okay.
And that was the turning point.
That was, yeah, big time. Okay. So, and then what were the things that were wrong? Like, you know what I mean? What were the main?
Well, I think the main one is the fact that most people who've experienced early trauma don't really know what it's like to feel good. You know, I lived my life being so unhappy. Everybody who would ever meet me would be like, oh, she's so funny, she's so happy, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, again, I was going home and not being happy. Like, I wasn't able to keep that with me, you know? It was a front I put on. You know, I had a job in sales when I lived in New York City. Well, you can't be unhappy to your buyers. I mean, you know that. You know, you got to put on. I mean, now we're coming to a place where people are accepting a little bit more authenticity if it doesn't include all of the positive things. But, you know, back then, no, you needed to be happy and present a happy face in order to get your sales, which was the whole point of the job. So, but, and I'm sorry, I think I just blanked a little bit on where we were going with that.
The major things that were wrong that you shifted the focus.
Okay, I think, again, the major one is not really knowing what it's like to feel good. And so one of the things that I've been focusing on for a while now is calibration. Because I remember something Abraham said maybe 10 years ago that has stuck with me because it planted a seed in me. Somebody in the audience said, how come I can't just go from being depressed to being joyful? And Abraham said, because your body would literally explode. The change in the vibration of the energy is not something your human body could handle. You know, I would say that was probably the first inkling I ever had of that issue.
So with that in mind, did you have to make a slow ascent?
Yes.
Up the emotional scale?
And calibrate it.
And
which to me means throwing it in neutral. Stop trying.
Okay, tell me more.
You know, so if you're angry, which obviously comes above depressed on the emotional scale that they use, you know, how do I get to joyful? Well, you have to go up the next steps, and I don't remember what all of them are, but I'm guessing that content is probably in between those two.
Content is like right here.
Right.
Like you're not in a bad and you're not really in a good, you're good, like you're content.
Well, and that brings up another point, because for people who have this kind of experience, content or peace often feels like boredom. And then what do? You go create some drama. That's what you do. So each step, you know, it's almost like each step needs to be 3 steps or 4 steps or 5 steps for somebody who has had this experience. Because again, it's about calibrating. It's about becoming comfortable in that space. And by comfortable, I mean, you're not going out and creating more stressors in your life because that's what you're used to. That's what you're familiar with. So you're going to create some drama. You're going to make an offhanded remark to somebody that you're friends with. It's going to cause some stress in the relationship. Or you're going to choose a way to drive somewhere that you knew was going to have traffic and road closures just so you could be angry. I mean, that drive in your nervous system to continue feeling the emotions that you are used to feeling, the strength of it cannot be underestimated. And if you're not aware, and it takes a long time, that's what it's taken me all this time to understand, is that, yeah, there may be people out there who go to an Abraham seminar, and again, I love Abraham. This is not any kind of disrespect there. And they're able to walk away from their job and manifest a brand new business where they're pulling in $100,000 their first year. And you know what? Congratulations. that has not been my experience. And I feel like there needs to be an addendum to law of attraction type things like that, a little asterisk, that if you've experienced childhood trauma, this may look completely different for you. You can get there. It's just not going to happen overnight, because again, your body would explode if you went from the typical feelings that you've lived your life having of not being happy or miserable or whatever, all that stuff in the bottom half of the scale. You just can't thrive in the top half without some time to get used to it.
Well, you've built a habit of vibration.
Right. That's a great way to put it.
And it's got neural pathways which are super deep, so they fire on their own, and they're just almost impossible to stop the firing.
Absolutely. And the only way you can do it, two ways. You have to be more connected to your body, because I heard somebody say, and I wish I remembered the person's name, but I'm not going to take credit for coming up with it, even though it's brilliant and I would love to, is that early or childhood trauma in its essence is just a disconnection from your true self.
Okay.
That's all it really is,
Go on.
Because, and I will send you the name of this woman who is a counselor on TikTok, who showed a Venn diagram a few weeks ago, which blew my mind. And on the one side, the big circle was safety. The other big circle intersecting was belonging. And the small circle that overlapped both of the big circles was a false identity. And true identity was off to the side, because safety and belonging are the two most important things to a human being. We want to feel safe and we want to feel as if we belong. And when those two needs cannot be met by being your true self, you create a false identity. And your true self kind of gets pushed off to the side, nowhere near that Venn diagram. And that false identity has taken over. And I just thought that was brilliant. It was so succinct in explaining that. I'd never seen anything quite that brief describe what can happen. So it really is a disconnection from your true self. And I think, like, I try to frame it that way for me. I mean, I've been through the forgiveness and Ho'oponopono and all of the processes that are necessary to move past the perception of what somebody has done to you. And I get some heat for this sometimes, because my thing is, your best friend always and forever is going to be the mirror. And if you want to live blaming somebody for what they did to you, which includes not only the actual event, but all of the crap it created in you that developed and sustained those habits, beliefs, and patterns that we were talking about earlier, you're still a victim. You're still acting like a victim. Because you can't have blame without feeling like a victim.
Yeah, blame's not far up from the very bottom.
No. And so, it's about, and this is where I think people get really uncomfortable, because it can get ugly, and it doesn't feel good. Let's just say that. Everybody's process is different, but it doesn't feel good, and I think people get scared of that it's never going to end if they allow themselves to go to those painful places. But something else, and I wanted to talk about this, and I'll throw it out there and we'll see where it goes, is how, a lot of what is preached, for lack of a better word, in the new age-ish type spiritual world is gratitude. Have to be grateful, right? Because gratitude raises your vibration. But perpetual gratitude for people who've experienced early trauma is nothing more than a continuation of ignoring their true feelings. So it's about having the courage and, hopefully having an inner sanctum that will support you. And whether or not that means a therapist or a pastor or some other type of spiritual guide, or just some good friends who maybe have already been down this path, to know that you can do this while lying on a feather bed. It doesn't have to be a bed of nails, and that there will be people there to remind you of the truth. Even when you are so far from acknowledging it, you can't even see it with binoculars, and that is key, to have that, to be on this path. This is not something you want to do alone completely. At the end of the day, you're always by yourself. It's the mirror. It's always me looking in the mirror, go, well, how did you participate in this, Stace? What's your role here? Because typically, for what I have discovered, is those roles come from those habits and patterns and beliefs that were created by the trauma. And it's not just, oh, I discovered that I have a hard time saying no, which comes from the people pleasing that I did in my childhood. That shit is threaded through so many different areas of your life by the time you get to a certain age, that it's not just one switch that you flip. It is a continual and constant unraveling of that. And that's the work, and, you step on the path and make that intent. And I remember doing this because I had gone to a yoga class that I loved at the YMCA when I lived in Tampa. And evidently the teacher had called in sick that day, and they converted it to like a silver sneakers chair yoga class. And I was like, what is this? I'm like 30 some years old. I don't want to be doing chair yoga. What the hell? And I was pissed. My ego completely took over because it wanted things its way. And I get home and I decide I'm going to do yoga anyway. I put my mat on the floor and I put in the tape that came with Caroline Myss's book, Entering the Castle, which is about St. Teresa of Avila. And as I listened to that, I made the commitment that I want to know who I really am. I had no idea what I was doing because the path that has taken me down, and it's been, I don't know, maybe that was 2005, so 17 years. You just don't know what it's going to bring. You just don't know what it's going to bring, which is why it's important to have that inner sanctum. Awareness is a process. Change is a process. You know that with the clients you deal with in your business.
Myself included.
I'm sorry?
Myself included.
Absolutely.
It's a lifelong journey, for sure. Now, would you say that these beliefs that were holding you back were right on the surface, or were they kind of like below the surface and you didn't even really know they were holding you back?
They were beneath all the behaviors.
Okay. So like the roots of the behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have to go through and like figure out which behaviors were holding you back and then start changing them?
I wish I could say it was that scientific.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got a logical brain.
Right. No, it was not like that for me.
Okay.
And maybe it might be for somebody else, And I also think there are different levels of intensity in behavior and beliefs. You know what I'm saying? There may be a minor one that doesn't take you long to change. One of the things that I realized was that my anger was attached to not feeling safe. Because there was a time in my life when I could say I was really teetering on the edge of having an anger problem. I was really ticked off at somebody one day, and I remember opening up the kitchen cabinets just so I could slam them shut. And I was like, this is a problem, Staci. This is not how a healthy person moves through life, And it was years after that where I finally got down to the root of it, which was I don't feel safe. And that's my defense mechanism. So through years of doing this, and I just want to put a pin in that for a second, because you're very into like health and fitness and nutrition. And I think so many people would never expect to work with you for a week and walk away with a body that looked like Jason Momoa's. Right? but I don't know that they treat the spiritual and the personal evolution journey in the same fashion.
Well, I have a theory.
Go.
Let's say for a second you could rate your body out of 10, your mind out of 10, your spirit out of 10. I think that the fastest one to see results in is the body. So if I could make people, like, I like to train the body first, the spirit, and then I kind of like to push the mind aside, as if, like, don't pay attention to that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, and then I rate my mind. So on my body out of 10 would be my dream body. On my mind out of 10 would be calm and positive.
Okay.
Right? That would be like a 10 out of 10 for me. And then as far as my spirit goes, a 10 out of 10 would be just aligned with that. So, like, living in the synchronicities and not resisting and not getting stuck on just things and dwelling and stuff like that, right? So the way I treat it, I start training the body first. And as I'm training the body, I'll dip into the spiritual side. And if they don't know Abraham, I'll definitely bring in Abraham. If they do know Abraham, I will talk about Abraham. Like, there's ways I train all three of these: mind, body, soul, with the people that want to go deeper into my programs. It always starts with the body, almost.
Interesting, because I've done the exact opposite.
That's so funny.
Right. And I think, well, part of it is because I completely disconnected from my body.
Okay.
I was very young, 4 or 5, and I remember going into the kitchen after everybody was in bed and putting Ritz crackers and baggies and stashing them in my roll top desk in my bedroom, so that when I woke up in the middle of the night from having what I now understand was probably a panic attack, I didn't know that then, I had something to soothe me. Because I was like, 5, 6, 7, I couldn't go down to the corner with a 20 and get a vial of Coke. That just, it wasn't an option. So food was what I used to make myself feel better. And that, as well as the trauma, really created a major disconnect with my body. Not to mention the fact that one of the behaviors that was born of the belief created from the trauma was that I'm only valuable when I'm smart and can figure things out.
Okay.
Okay. Because that was how I got acknowledgement and validation from people in my life. At least that was my perception as a child, that when I was able to figure something out, when I was able to use my intellect to make somebody's life better or easier, I got praised for that. I got validated for that. And so, that came with me into adulthood, big time. I'm the one my friends call when they can't figure out something on their computer, which is hilarious because it's the only class I ever failed in college. But, or they have a medical issue, because I worked as a standardized patient at a university's medical school for 7 years. So I know a lot about different things in medicine. I'm the one people come to, my friends come to. And it took me a long time to make that connection, that I am more than my intellect. That my value goes beyond that. The reasons for me to appreciate myself are so much deeper and broader than that. Because it's only been in the last couple years that I've done plenty of things to focus on my body over the years, but nothing was sustainable because I hadn't dealt with the disconnection, and now that I have, through different things like, vagal nerve stimulation and lots of different things that they're now talking about in the world of trauma. None of that stuff existed. Not in any kind of mainstream way when I was first moving through this process and coming to understand things. Now it's a focus. But it took me getting some health challenges, for me. And to my credit, I didn't take the doctor's advice immediately because I knew I needed to do more work on connecting. Because taking their advice would have been one more way that I went whole hog on something, pardon the food pun, with, without it being sustainable. And something in me said, this is not going to work unless you address the connection. And so now it's about intuitive eating skills and really understanding when I'm full and what feels good and what makes my body feel in different ways. But yeah, I've done it the complete opposite of the way you do it with people.
Yeah, that's the way it is. I mean, we all have taken very different routes to get to ultimately the same place, hopefully, which is.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to emphasize, because I think we still live in a world where we see somebody do something, like take Richard Branson, for example, and how he started with, I think he started printing a newspaper. I'm almost, because I've read his books, I'm pretty sure that was how he started. All the way up to owning how many multi-million or billion-dollar businesses, and so we want to look at how somebody else got to the success that we say we want, and we try to do it that particular way, ignoring and not paying attention in any way to what our intuition is whispering, because we've created such a wall of white noise that it can't get through.
Yeah.
Because the brain's taken over, and I'm going to do it this way.
Life in general is just white noise. Like,
absolutely.
It's just, habits of the past and other people's goals that made more money than yours a lot of times.
Exactly. And, we need money in this society. I mean, it's how we function. You can't get a Diet Coke with some beads anymore. It doesn't work like that. So you need it in order to live in this world. And I've said for a long time, food, money, and sex. If you make something about one of those three things, I'm almost willing to bet my life there's something underneath it. Because it's rarely about one of those three things. Those are just placeholders for your shit, basically, those three subjects. But it's, money is a very complex issue when it comes to trauma. And it comes back to the core being self-worth, and what you believe your value is and all those kinds of things. And it sounds a little cliched, but I have found it to be true, because things started changing for me the more I got connected to myself.
Got it. And how long, would it take somebody to go through those steps?
It depends.
Yeah.
I wish I could offer a more concrete answer, but it depends. It depends on the level of trauma you experienced. It depends on how long it took you to really address that. I mean, I was raised in the 60s, and my first memory of it was in 1996. So do the math. I mean, I was already in my mid 30s. So I had a lot of time to create self-sabotaging patterns and habits. So, if you're in your 20s, it's not going to take as long. You're middle-aged, it's still worth the journey, as far as I'm concerned, because life is never going to be perfect, but it can always be better.
So where would you say that you were before you started this journey, and where are you now? What's
I don't even recognize her.
Yeah.
I don't even recognize her. I look at the person I was when I walked into that Unity bookstore. Actually, it was in West Palm Beach. I might have said Tampa before, but I lived in West Palm back in the 80s. And, being exposed to that level of, because I don't know that As a Man Thinketh is really spiritual or religious as much as it is philosophical, and there's definitely some overlap there. But I look at who I was and what I was living at the time and who I was living as, and I don't even recognize her. and I go through the different stages. So it's not like the journey I've been on was for naught. I feel like with this understanding over the last 5 or 6 years about how the trauma influenced me, or the disconnection to my real self influenced my life, which has only happened probably in the last 7 to 10 years. I don't even recognize the person I was when I moved back to Pittsburgh. And it's been a ride, because I became a caregiver for my mom, and it's been a journey. But again, I don't recognize her either.
Well, yeah, all the time. The littlest thing completely changes your mentality sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I look at how broken I believed I was. I believed I was broken.
Gotcha.
And yeah, I felt like I was the living 3-dimensional Humpty Dumpty. And who was going to put me back together again? And that happened like 3 or 4 times in my life, where I just felt broken and I lost almost everything. But that's what it took me to get here.
Okay, so for anybody out there that has that broken feeling, what would be like a seed of thought that you could plant in their mind?
That you're not broken, you just believe you are. And if you are willing to look at where that belief came from, you can change that feeling.
Nice. Cool. Now, you mentioned a journal that you were. Tell me more about your journal project.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about this. I've been journaling for years, and there's a woman named Danielle Laporte. She's Canadian. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of her, but she's a wonderful coach, spiritual kind of person. And I was watching one of her videos probably 10, 12 years ago, and she talked about burning her journals. And I was like, oh, how do you burn your journals? That's like your life, your everything.
Oh, I couldn't burn them fast enough.
Right? Well, but you know what? Her saying that made me go, what the fuck am I holding on to?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because we just had a shredding event at a place here, and the guy opened it up and they were all my journals, and he goes, oh, are these the secret records? And I'm like, no, just my anger and angst that we're getting rid of. That's what I'm shredding today. So I don't journal, and I haven't in a while in the same way that I used to.
Okay.
But I missed the ritual. I missed having some kind of routine in the morning, but I didn't want it to take an hour. And then I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do yoga. It's going to be noon before I start my day. That doesn't work. So a therapist had said to me, have you thought about just doing a morning check-in? And, my ego was like, challenge accepted, because I'm going to make it better than what you just suggested. And so I started creating this for myself, where I check in several different areas of my life. I do like a 5-minute data dump.
Okay.
Just to clear things out, kind of like the morning pages, but not as long. Just, shit that was bothering me from yesterday, things I feel anxious about today, whatever, just put it all on paper. And then I ask myself some questions in the different areas of my life. And I have found that has helped me to connect to myself, because we don't ask ourselves those questions most of the time. And sometimes all your body needs is a glass of water. It can be that simple. Other times it needs to sweat and exert.
Yeah.
To purge something, And so I have created a 31-day, 10-minute self-care journal where you can connect with yourself better. And at the end, feel like, hopefully, you know yourself a little bit better. And you see where your resistances are to giving yourself certain things. You can see where your resistances are to acknowledging that you do need certain things. Because you can't change it if you're resistant until you acknowledge you're resistant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm very, very excited about it. It's almost ready to go to press. It'll be available exclusively on Amazon, at least the first edition. And I expect it to be finished by the end of May. Expect it to be up on Amazon by the end of May.
That's awesome. I have a morning ritual. Instead of checking in, I project my future.
Okay.
But I could use a good check-in. I haven't checked in a while. So
no, I like that too. And I think I know for myself that I don't feel like I'm in a place yet where I could do what you're doing and have it be meaningful enough to make a difference. Okay. I'm still in connecting and understanding what it is I need and what my body is trying to tell me. You've spent a lot of time working on the physical where I haven't, and they do dovetail. And it's important for me to know that. So particularly for anybody who has experienced early trauma, I think this is such a valuable tool, because that's what I do. I create tools for personal evolution, because we can't have collective evolution without personal evolution. And, to me, I'm just a link in the chain. I'm a link in the chain of evolution, which is so much more than opposable thumbs. It's about knowing who you are and then finding a way to navigate life as that. And not allowing the other stuff to come in and give you road rage on we all have moments that are blips, but to do it on a regular basis, or to continue working in job environments that are toxic for us because it's reminiscent of what's familiar. That's all important in the evolution of human beings as a species to me. And so the more connected you are to yourself, to your mind, your spirit, your body, your environment, the better a shot you have of succeeding at anything you put your mind to.
100%. And it forces you to be present.
Right.
Sorry, I coughed there. Forces you to be present to do that. Like a lot of times when you're driving, you don't even notice the car get way too hot because you're just lost in a sea of thought, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's like 100 degrees in here.
It's like that frog story.
Yeah.
About the frog in the pot of water.
Yes. Right. Yep. Yeah. So, just taking the time to be present to realize that, it's too hot in here, and those little things, if you take the time in the morning to be present, they just become more of a habit of being present, which is a life changer.
It's just so easy to get absorbed in. I call it being absorbed into normal, because I was on a jetway going from New York to Tampa one time, and there was this really tall, big guy in front of me, and he was wearing a mail bag, and the strap of it was cutting right through a mole on the back of his neck. And my first thought was, man, that's gotta hurt. And then I realized he didn't even feel it. He doesn't even feel it. It's just part of his normal, and we all have that in our lives. And then you couple it with COVID and all of the changes that have come from that, whether it's the universal pause or whatever you want to call it, that makes people make changes. I've joked, I've had my feet glued to the surfboard for 20 some years since I walked away from my corporate job, and this shit's affected me. So I can't imagine how somebody who's used to doing a 9 to 5, Wednesdays you go to the grocery store, Thursdays you come home and do laundry, you know what I mean? Having the schedule, oh my God, I can't imagine the trauma these people are going through.
Their bodies too.
Absolutely. And so it's the mindfulness, the being present and scheduling it. Because I said to someone the other day about it, it's something I'm putting some focus on in my life. I'm like, do I literally have to put something on my Google Calendar 7 times a day and basically bow to Mecca 7 times a day so I can get this into my nervous system and my mind so that I remember this? And my attitude is whatever it takes.
Yeah.
You have to set 7 alarms a day, do it. Put it on as a task on your Google Calendar or whatever you use, do it. Because sometimes that's what it takes.
For sure. Have you ever got into Neville Goddard?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's
Yep.
coming to mind right now because he talks a lot about trying to live in the imagination and pruning all of the garbage weeds that grow in your mind. That's really impacted me lately. It just came to mind.
Well, I'm a huge Florence Scovel Shinn fan,
Okay.
and his work
Not
is
familiar.
largely based on her. Is based on her work. She was a Unity teacher. She wasn't a minister. I don't think she had a minister's license, but she was a Unity teacher back in the early 1900s. And there's a wonderful, like, if you search her on YouTube, and I don't remember the woman's name, but she's done audio recordings of all of her books.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been periods of my life where that's what I've fallen asleep to.
Yeah.
That's what I've woken up to,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff. And I think, I know we're close to out of time. And the thing that I think is so important is to remember that every baby step counts, even when it doesn't feel like it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be a while before you realize it. Absolutely.
Exactly. But that as long as you're taking the tiniest of baby steps, you're still moving in the direction. And, I don't want to sound like some, Tony Robbins-esque, whatever, but I found that to be true. When I look at it in retrospect, I can see how every night I fell asleep listening to The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn had an impact on my subconscious. Who knows what was able to be released because I was putting that in,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to think of my subconscious as a castle with a moat and a gatekeeper. And sometimes the gatekeeper's like, she's not ready to handle that yet.
Yeah.
Right? And other times it's like, moat down and here it comes,
Yeah.
But every baby step matters.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I thank you so much. Did you mention where people can find you already?
My website is Staci B, and it's Staci with an I, STACIB.com, and everything's on there. I actually have for anybody who would find it valuable, I have a trauma education resources and healing guide that you can download for free that really is a nice foundation for your toolkit in terms of authors and innovators, social media influencers. I mean, it would blow your mind, the stuff that's out there on Instagram and TikTok on this subject. And there's a lot of really, really valuable information being shared.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share with everybody?
No, just I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I've really been wanting to do this for a long time, and finally was able to love myself enough to understand that it did have value, and maybe not to everybody, but to some, and that it was worth sharing. So I really cannot tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Absolutely. This is something that's affected an awful lot of people.
Definitely.
So I thank you very much. Everybody, Staci Backauskas.